What's up, you guys? Adam here with Anabolic Climbing. And if you're here, you're not here because you want to do steroids like a bodybuilder or like a powerlifter. You saw what the Russians were able to do in Sochi. You're extrapolating a little bit from what you're seeing in the enhanced games. And in your mind, you're thinking, I don't know if this steroids all the time is really the move. You think you could be a half natty. And you know what? Maybe you can. If you guys like these breakdowns into some pretty interesting half natty protocols that have led to Olympic level records broken, stick around, hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell, and we're going to hop into it. So what do I mean when I say act like a half natty? Well, the Russian Olympic team weren't running steroids all year round, whereas you would see certain countries like China running growth hormone secretagogues in the offseason, which the Russians might have been doing too, or potentially some of the doping that you would expect from the North Koreans in the offseason, particularly with the lifters. It was really the Russian team that was able to deliver 29 total medals, 11 golds, and really smash Sochi. And sure, what separated them was the inability to get caught, but being able to just have an extra 5 to 10% boost when you're already as strong as you can be to get you over the edge versus Olympic level competition, that seems to be a pretty winning formula. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you guys aren't familiar with the Duchess cocktail, and we're going to go into that a little bit sooner, basically what happened is it was a combination of 3 compounds, which was primobolan, trenbolone, and anavar, and they dissolved it in some alcohol. They would swish it around their mouth, getting it into the mucosal membrane so that they were administering it sublingually, or basically through the veins in the mouth, because alcohol kind of cut up your mouth a little bit. And that drug basically traveled directly in the bloodstream and was only detectable for 3 to 5 days. They gave 1 cocktail to the men, 1 cocktail to the women, assuming it would be different strengths, and these guys and gals utterly crushed it. So we can kind of infer that because they had to beat the testing, that they were only on this for game day and not for the rest of the year. This matters a lot to rock climbers because most of you guys are concerned about getting too big, or you don't want to be on steroids all the time. So let's talk about it and extrapolate a little bit, right? What do I mean? So if you guys have been keeping track of the enhanced games, this is James Magnuson, known as the Missile, who put on, I think, 40 to 50 pounds to try to break a world record, and he didn't. He was on all the gear and all the PEDs and swam slower than his counterpart, Christian Gogolamev. Don't quote me on that. I'm going to try my very best. But Golamev basically used a lower dose protocol and was able to break the world record by, I think, 0.2 to 0.5 seconds. Not good enough in my opinion. Dude needs to get better, but strictly speaking, he was able to swim faster than any other human has swam before. But what's really interesting is, as he continued to stay on the protocol for an extended period of time, he wasn't able to repeat his performance, lending credence to the idea that sometimes training naturally, but then having super physiological doses on game day led to outsized performances versus being chronically on performance-enhancing drugs. Interesting. And also backed up with what we've seen in the Olympic Games. Whereas when you have these athletes that are mostly natty, taking oral steroids or administering steroids orally on the day, I don't believe there is oral trenbolone, but God bless if Rodchenkov was able to synthesize that. Again, leading to outsized performances. So let's go through the Duchess cocktail itself and figure out what we can extrapolate and what we can replicate and what we can't. So they basically used a combination of the 3 drugs. There was oxandrolone or anavar, primobolan, and trenbolone. And I didn't realize this until today because I haven't seen anyone selling it. Someone from my Discord mentioned that they had an available source. But primobolan was also available as an oral, which was new to me. I've only known about it as an injectable. And it's also available in both an acetate and an enanthate. I use an enanthate. So ultimately what you guys have is they were swishing some alcohol, administering it sublingually, which is a mechanism of administration you can use. And that actually does a couple different things. Number one, it's going to increase your level of clearance time, which is what the Russians were interested in. They didn't want something that was detectable for extended periods of time. They wanted something to hit fast and clear fast. And that's what sublingual administration will do. The other option, though, is to basically just swallow the pill and get first pass the liver metabolism, which will allow something to hit harder, but it will hit slower. And it'll also give more time for things to build up in your system. So if you're going to go and take Anavar or Primobolan sublingually, it's going to hit you within the first 5 to 15 minutes, and it's going to clear in a couple of hours. Or contrast that with if you were just swallowing the pill. That would probably hit you harder in 30 minutes to 60 minutes, and it would hit harder, but it would also stay in your system for about 9 hours. That's just sort of the pharmacokinetics as that goes. So, moving forward, just because you are taking oral steroids does not mean that this is risk-free. The risks are absolutely real, and I want to go into them before I start expanding more about how one could leverage this for rock climbing as sort of being a half natty. Number one is HPTA suppression, and I want to go into that a little bit more. What I have said on this channel over and over and over again, and what I stand by, is whenever you take an exogenous androgen, it's going to limit the feedback loop between your LH and FSH, and it's going to limit the amount of overall natural testosterone that you're going to produce. If you were a gal and you try this, because a lot of the ladies were able to have outsized performances, a voice tracker is mandatory for an experiment like this. I do not believe that ladies should be on steroids for extended periods of time. In this particular protocol, I want to give some parameters, but I also want to mention risks. Voice changes are possible. Virilization is possible. Changes to your lipids, or basically smashing your HDL and increasing your LDL, is very likely. Liver stress is going to happen as a result of some of these protocols. Keep in mind, just because these are orals, it doesn't mean that there's inherently free lunch. In the event that your drugs are faked, you might need to do some post-cycle therapy, even with limited exposure. That could be enclomiphene, that could be HCG. But, if you're expecting to take Anavar and you're getting SARMs, maybe you're going to need PCT to restart your endocrine system. There's a possibility, being honest here, that your endocrine system may not reach the peaks that it is at now. That is a possible outcome. So just because you're taking orals doesn't mean that this is something that is risk-free. It's not. And it's also possible that you might need to be on testosterone replacement therapy as a result of this protocol. Do I think that for this protocol, that's going to be the likely outcome? No, not at all. But just because that's not likely doesn't mean that it's not a possibility. And I want folks to be aware of the risks going in before I start talking about dosing and duration. Obviously, you can always go ahead and send your drugs to Genoshic to make sure that it is what it says it is. It's also possible that you could be very responsible and limit your exposure to 3 to 5 days and not do it more than a couple times a year. And you shouldn't need post-cycle therapy, and you shouldn't need enclomiphene or HCG or something like that. But a lot of folks, when you realize you have some additional power in a pill, want to start reaching into that well over and over and over again. And, you did so well on that last project and you're not pulling quite as hard as you used to. Maybe you want to reach back in one more time. And that's really where a lot of the risk for this comes from. And by the way, me being on a testosterone base, I used Anavar for 9 months last year in similar doses to what I'm going to talk about. And my lab work was flawless. And I've also done this when I was only on HCG monotherapy, and I watched my testosterone tank by 400 points. Just being transparent here. So now that we're over the risks and some mechanisms of mitigating, whether for potential post-cycle therapy. By the way, if you guys are really curious, I've made whole videos on what ancillaries you could use to limit some of the liver stress or some of the lipid changes, whether that's running ezetimibe or glutathione or TUDCA or milk thistle or berberine. I'm just looking around my monitor right now. There's a whole bunch of stuff in front of me. Those are all things you could take in conjunction with these orals. But again, just part of the risk that goes into it. So let's start talking about what are some of the levels of suppression that you can expect. And for this, and I'm going to link all of the sources in the description below, they gave oxandrolone at 2.5 milligrams to pubescent boys, and you watch their LH and FSH basically get cut almost in half, and their endogenous testosterone get cut in half completely, from 1.9 nanomole to, I believe, 0.8. And LH went from 1.7 to 1.1. By the way, in all cases for the 10 kids that took this administration of oxandrolone, all of them recovered to natural testosterone levels after they discontinued the drug. Anavar is pretty darn benign when in fact it is Anavar. But the real thing that we're interested in is not for 3-month exposure. What about 3 to 5 day exposure? And how much does half-lives happen to make a difference? Well, I believe this was a 3-month administration of injectable testosterone versus daily topical gel versus 3 times administration daily of nasal testosterone, which is a thing that I did not know existed up until last year. Basically what you see is the faster the ester, or the faster or shorter the half-life rather, the more that it mimics endogenous testosterone production. So just so you guys know, your testosterone peaks in the morning, then gets lower and lower and lower throughout the day, then the cycle repeats itself. So lower at night, higher in the morning, and is going to pulse throughout the day. And the shorter acting esters basically give you more, or a closer to mimicking your natural testosterone production, so you get shut down less. So when you're taking injectable testosterone with a longer half-life, you're going to get 90 to 85% shutdown. Topical gels, 50 to 60%. Daily nasal, 20 to 30%. And this is after 3 months, not 3 to 5 days. Could you extrapolate that for if you were to take orals for 3 to 5 days with short half-lives, or if you were to do it sublingually, could you also have limited levels of HPTA suppression? Yes. The answer is yes. Does that also mean that if you continue to take this past the 3 to 5 day window, will you get higher levels of HPTA suppression? Abso-fucking-lutely. So look, if you're able to stick to the 3 to 5 day rule, you can probably get rid of it, or you could probably handle the side effects without major HPTA suppression. Whether or not you are responsible enough to do that is your business. And know yourself well enough to know, are you going to need more, are you going to need some enclomiphene or some HCG to restart that endocrine system, or are you going to be able to stick to the protocol laid out? So let's actually go into the Duchess cocktail specifically and other compounds and talk about half-lives. The do's and the don'ts. The do's. Anavar. Benign enough to give to women and children. The dose should not be identical for women and children, or for women and men. For men can tolerate I've seen men tolerate up to 50 to 100 milligrams. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't go higher than 10 to 20. But folks can tolerate it. I've seen climbers run 20 and have a bad time. I'm just letting you know point blank. Primobolan, 9-hour half-life. Turinabol, 9-hour half-life. 10 milligrams for each is more than enough per day. And orals tend to saturate. So even though the half-life is 9 hours, the metabolites may stay in your system for 3 to 5 days. So if you were to take it for multiple days, the metabolites are going to compound, which are going to raise your overall androgen burden. Men, I believe, produce around 35 milligrams of androgen per week. That is the starting dose for ladies to start transitioning to becoming a man. So if you were to pop 30 milligrams of androgens over a 3-day period, congratulations. You basically have double the total amount of androgens in your system. And you've gotten twice as strong without putting on any additional weight and increasing your neuromuscular feedback and helping out your ability to drive acute force production. Good work. My don'ts. I do not recommend Winstrol, Superdrol, or Halotestin. Winstrol, because it can dry out joints and change the collagen matrix. I know climbers that love it. I am not one of them. Superdrol and halotestin. Superdrol is incredibly liver toxic and will utterly nuke your lipid profile. Even for 1 to 2 weeks, it can skew lipids brutally. And same for halotestin. On top of halo being roid rage in a bottle. Unless you are a competitive bodybuilder, I don't think any of these 3 compounds should be used for rock climbers. And even if it wouldn't inherently shut down your HPTA after 3 to 5 days, it's more toxic than what you need. I cannot in good conscience suggest trying to source those compounds. The only reason I have some of these in my cabinet is because they're given to me for free, because life is cool. Next up, allegedly. Let's talk about dosing. You could go 10 milligrams on the Anavar, Turinabol, or Primobolan. For ladies, 2.5 milligrams of Anavar every other day for a maximum of 3 doses. Ladies, unless you want to virilize, do not go higher than this. The longer you stay exposed to this, it is not a question of when you will start developing masculinizing features. It's a question of when. You can use a voice changer to figure out when you start dropping octaves and cut shit off ASAP. For ladies, when your vocal folds change, this is not reversible. If you start getting facial features to change, these are not reversible. Would I expect someone to lose their period after 3 doses of 2.5 milligrams of Anavar? No. On the other hand, in the event that you're given something that you didn't know that you were planning on, or you got something that was overdosed, you could have a really bad time, which is why if you're a lady and you're going to do this, please send your stuff over to Genoshik. Please confirm that you're getting what you say you're getting in the dose that you're supposed to be in. I am deeply concerned for any lady that wants to go down this path. Just because I'm showing you what's possible does not mean you should. And yeah, look, as far as the guys go, could you potentially tank something that was faked? In the event that you end up getting a SARM, are you going to be able to restart your endocrine system? Yeah, probably. For a 3 to 5 day exposure, you'll probably be okay. In the event that your Anavar was faked and you got Winstrol, or you're going to pop a pulley, not inherently, you might be fine. I just want to lay out all of the warnings on purpose so that you can give yourself some informed consent. I don't want to say this like, oh, you can just pop pills for 3 to 5 days 1 to 4 times a year and not have to worry about PCT. Look, you were an N=1 experiment. The way that you tolerate drugs might not be the way that I tolerate drugs. Also, the way you tolerate drugs changes as you age. And last but not least, if just in general, even though you might be able to get away without having to do post-cycle therapy, or you might not need to restart your endocrine system, I would ask yourself, in the event that you're going to need that, is that a risk worth taking to you? If going down this path to try to do this one particular project, are you open to like running this risk with the knowledge that you might need to restart your endocrine system? Because just because statistically speaking it shouldn't be an issue doesn't mean that the risk is 0. And if the answer is yes, and you want to do it, and that project is enough in your head that that's worth it, that's a thing you could do. And in the event that testosterone replacement therapy is on your list of shit to do anyways, and that's an outcome that you're fucking stoked on, then yeah, go play ball. Like I said, I ran Anavar for 9 or 10 months last year at 10 milligrams a day, and my labs were flawless for most of it. So like with a testosterone base, you can do that. When I ran Anavar with only HCG, again, my after a couple of months, my testosterone got cut in half with HCG. So I say all of that to say, if you're trying to push the limits and worrying about adding additional weight as a factor, or you're not ready to go all the way on testosterone replacement therapy, this is a potential option, but I want you to acknowledge the risks first. Does that mean that Papa Adam approves of you doing an oral-only cycle? I'm still going to look at you like you're not ready to fucking hop in on this. But, yeah, definitely run your blood work afterwards and let me know how it goes for you. Personally speaking, I have just restocked up on Test, and I have no intention of getting my endocrine system back up to where it was before. I am fully committed to getting my hormones from a vial. Anyways, as always, I am Adam with Anabolic Climbing, wishing you good luck, happy sending, stay safe out there, and in the event that you run this for 3 to 5 days to hit your climbing project, let me know how it goes. Take care.